Good evening. It is Thursday, August 17th, 2023 at 6 p.m. We are at the District Service Center in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the land of the Minnewacaton Dakota people. Minnewacaton means dwellers of the Spirit Lake. Our first item on the agenda is our roll call. Dana?
Here.
Here. Here.
Present. Next is our Pledge of Allegiance. Will you join me?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have 3.0, and that is the approval of our agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Simi, second by Linda. Any discussion or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is carried. The next item on our agenda is 4.0, comments to the board. At this time, individuals may speak to the school board on any item relating to South Washington County Schools. The board will not respond to or discuss your comments. Character abuse or specific complaints identifying staff, students, or task force members will not be permitted. The superintendent may be asked to prepare a response to your concerns. The comments to the board period will be held up to 30 minutes in total. Each speaker is permitted to speak up to 3 minutes in total. The school board will allow up to 3 speakers per topic. At 3 minutes, the microphones will be turned off and we will move on to the next speaker or the next agenda item. This evening, we have one person signed up tonight, and that is Deanna.
About 6 to 8 times during the year, and they don't give us our final count until late October. What's we're looking at right now shows that we're about 8 students under budget last year. And as a point of record, our highest enrollment, highest student count, ADM count in SoWashCo County schools was 18,754 students in the school year of 2019-2020. As we look to the future, I project enrollment for financial reasons based on a cohort survival method. I generally don't use new housing projections in my forecasts. If those come, they come. It does look like kindergarten picked up a lot more in the last month or so that it should remain pretty strong for the next 3 or 4 years in increasing enrollment, as we do have pretty robust numbers in grades 4 through 8. As you know, as we look at enrollment, we also look at how much room do we have for these students. We do have capacity issues still. So looking at next year's numbers, at this point, East Ridge is about 121% of capacity, about 357 students over capacity. Pine Hill is about 27 students over capacity. Gray Cloud is about 14 students over capacity. Woodbury High School, almost 30 students over, and Altman about 10. Then we also have schools that are close to capacity. We've got 18 spots left in Red Rock Elementary, 23 spots left in Lake Middle School, about 50 spots left in Bailey Elementary. And some of these numbers really don't, you have to put them in context how big the school is. And then Park High School's got about 80 spots left. What are the implications of enrollment? Generally on our budget, as you know, the basic formula multiplied by the number of students we have in its easiest sense to understand makes up about 40 to 45% of our total revenue. We raise about almost $11,000 in state aids and levies for each student. So as we look at number of students, basically for every 927 students, we raise about $1 million in revenue. Students are counted differently in the different grades. K through 6 is weighted at 1.0, and grades 7 through 12 are weighted at 1.2. This produces what's called pupil units, and that's what's used to determine your basic state aid and your operating levy. K-12 is not the only thing we look at. When I look at our revenue coming in, we also receive, we count ADMs for early childhood special education. Basically, we're funded for about 25% per student because they don't go to school that much during the day. So generally, if we have 1,000 students in this program, we receive aid for 250 full-time students. Voluntary pre-kindergarten and School Readiness Plus are state programs which allow us to receive basic aid for preschool children. And then we have extended time. We can get paid for a student for up to 1.2% of their time here. We do receive reduced funding, or funding is reduced by post-secondary option students, PSEO. That money, when they're with the college, goes to the college. We do have an arrangement with Century College in which we just pay them the straight tuition, we collect the revenue, and between the two entities, we each save about $100,000 that way. And then finally, we did put into place an online school last year, and that we're looking for that to increase our revenue as students stay within our district and don't always have to go out for either online school or PSEO. When we talk about revenue, we also talk about, what's the formula allowance. The formula allowance for general education is an amount per pupil. This year it is $7,138 per student. I said we get almost $11,000. That's because we also add on our local operating revenue. This chart illustrates, although that the state did raise it 4% this year, for this school year, we're still seeing a gap between what the state provides and what the amount would be if it was funded based on inflation, because we have to pay inflationary wages and expenses, but the formula has not gone up at the same rate. You can see there's still a gap. At this point, it's running about $1,000 per student under, meaning that we'll have to fill that gap somewhere else or reduce expenses. So if you look at our forecast, I just want to talk about a few assumptions that we make. At this point, we're looking at increasing enrollment for budget reasons about 0.5% per year using a cohort survival method. We do know that in 2024, the basic formula increased by 4%. That's already been built into the budget. We do know that next year the state's increasing the basic formula by 2%. And then after those years, you won't have to guess at what, you'll still guess, but you won't have to wait to see what the formula will be because it will be tied to inflation. But that is also capped at 3%. So your formula is going to go up either at the rate of inflation or 3% if it's below 3%. We're also assuming that special education revenue will increase about $3 million to $4.2 million per year in my forecast. Some of that is based on that the state put a lot more money into special education trying to reduce the cross subsidy in 2024. That money will stay for, we probably had an extra $8 million in special education revenue for 2024. In 2026, they're going to add another 6% of the gap, should increase the special education revenue by $1.5 to $2 million more than normal. We're assuming in our models that wages and benefits increase about 2.5% a year. We also assume that we have to add a licensed staff position for every additional 16 students. And that all of the expenses, we're assuming that will increase about 2% a year. Now, if we don't hit these numbers, we have to make adjustments to how much the quantities we're buying or other things we can do. We can't make a lot of adjustments on utilities and things like that. So with those assumptions, our current forecast, we're showing that eventually our expenses are going to outpace our revenues again, mainly because the bulk of our revenue is only going up by 2%, while all of our expenses are going up by 2%. So say we have $300 million in expenses and $300 million in revenues. The state has said, we'll increase your basic aid by 2%, but that's only about 140 million of the 300 million. The rest of the revenue stays pretty flat. In the meantime, all the expenses go up by 2% or so. So eventually, your expenses will outpace your revenues. And as we're looking to see, at the end of this year and then into next year, our fund balance going up to a pretty healthy, 12 to 14%. We'll see after the audit and stuff. But then, unless the state, can fund some more special ed or increase that basic formula a little bit more, eventually your expenses will catch up to your revenues. So that's our update for this month. I'll take any questions, and thank you for your time.
Any questions?
Hey, Dan. Can you just, you had mentioned that the basic formula covers about a little less than half of what our funding is. Can you just kind of give a quick top-line overview of where each of that $300 million in revenue comes from? So basic formula is X amount, local operating revenue is Y amount.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do in my head. So about 140 million of it comes from the basic formula times the enrollment. I'd say, I think it's about we'll say for next couple of years, 40 million comes from direct special education aid. Then we raise about 60 million in local operating levies. And the rest is just miscellaneous things, interest, and fees, and admissions.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dan. Stay there. 6.2 is Minnesota Department of Education review.
So South County Schools submitted what is termed a review and comment to the Minnesota Department of Education regarding construction projects that constitute the $201,225,000 long-range facility plan. Minnesota Statute 123B71 requires the Commissioner of Education to return a positive or negative review and comment within 60 days of the district's submittal. The district received a positive review and comment from the Commissioner on August 15th of 2023. The review and comment includes the geographical area being served, the list of school structures, list of specific deficiencies in the facilities, description of the projects, specification of the source funding, and documentation obligating the district to comply with laws and standards. The Commissioner of the Department of Education is required to include public comments to the review and comment. No public comments were submitted to the Commissioner. The review and comment letter from the Commissioner indicates that the proposed project appears to be in the long-term interest of the school district. Based on the department's analysis of the school district's required documentation and other pertinent information from source of MDE, the Commissioner of Education provides a positive review and comment. This item is here to satisfy the requirement of having a public meeting, presenting the review and comment, and the review and comment letter is published in your packet.
Okay, any comments, questions? Okay, we're at 6.3, and that is our long-range facility planning bond question, attendance boundary adjustments, and that will be with Dan Pyan again.
I don't have any PowerPoint, Sean.
It went off. You have yours?
They're not in here.
Instead of Dan telling a joke, I think I'll just share that Dan will give the presentation. And taking a look at the work with long-range facility planning, the board and our community can expect detailed boundaries after the September 7th meeting. We're not going to put out maps prior to the start of school, but what you'll hear tonight from Dan is a higher overview of where we're at with attendance boundaries and some of the best estimates in terms of numbers of students that would be shifted should question 2 not be successful.
Wow, we're there.
We'll be late. Our final information presentation tonight is talking about the process a little bit about drawing up of boundaries. And why are we talking about boundaries? Well, it will be part of the discussion as we talk about the long-range facility plan and the election coming up. So title bonds and boundary changes. So if both question 1 and 2 pass in the November 7th, 2023 election, there will not be elementary school boundary changes for the 24-25 school year. Bond question 1 fails, or if bond question 1 passes and bond question 2 fails, attendance boundary changes at elementary schools will be implemented for the 24-25 school year. Some middle school boundaries will be adjusted to follow elementary school changes. We try to keep the cohorts together. And there'll be no changes to high school boundaries. Some of the guiding principles that we're doing as we're putting together the boundary adjustments. We're looking to accommodate space needs for up to 8 years. We're looking to minimally impact families currently enrolled in South Washington County schools and impact as few families as possible. The lower overall enrollment at elementary schools that are currently over capacity. We're pushing to lower overall enrollment at the schools that are currently over capacity or projected to be over capacity in the next 5 years. And we're increasing enrollment at the elementary schools that are significantly under capacity. And wherever possible, we're trying to reduce our transportation costs. So as we look at what we've put together so far, and as we said earlier, we will be, at the September 7th meeting, we'll have more detailed information for everybody to look at. But at this point, as we look at this chart, the blue line on the left is the capacity of each of these schools. These are elementaries. The orange line in the middle is our projections for the next 5 years of the attendance at these elementary schools. And the gray line is where we look to be after elementary attendance boundaries are adjusted. We have the same concept for the middle schools. Blue line is the current capacity. The orange line is the projection of where they're going to be. And then the gray line is where they're going to be after we make adjustments. Like I said, we're not looking at doing high school boundaries. We don't have to worry about that. What's going to happen next is on September 7th, we'll give you a boundary change presentation and have discussion. And once that's done, the boundary change information will be shared with staff, families, community on our facility planning website and a newsletter starting in mid-September. Once we get to that, people can go to this website and also for anything we've done so far in the whole plan.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have high school boundaries. We just saw in the financial update, Eastridge is like 131% capacity or something like that. Why aren't we doing, if this doesn't pass, why aren't we doing high school boundaries?
We didn't want to make the adjustments already. If it doesn't pass, we'll have to decide whether we're going to go out again right away, or we can make those later. We're just not guaranteeing we're going to do any in that school year, just because if we're going to go out right away again, there's no reason to move all those kids around. We'll just have to make do with what they're doing.
Yep, and I think part of the rest of our conversation around that is the disruption to high schools. And we know what occurs at the high school level when attendance boundaries are adjusted. If we're going to be grandfathering in the 11th and 12th graders, I mean, are we going to be sending kids that are going to be going into 11th and 12th grade to a new high school? And so we get into all those details. The reality is if it doesn't pass, we're going to have to come back. We're going to be looking at other alternatives throughout the year, different deliveries, every student taking online courses, whatever that is, we can look at other options. But we really feel strongly that the only way we're going to really solve the problem is by doing the addition. I should say the planned addition. And if that wouldn't go, Katie, then we would have to take a look at high school boundaries.
Okay, I just feel like if we're doing the boundaries, I feel like we should have the plan for all the boundaries. I don't like being on the ballot time after time after time again. And if we shared with families, similar to the elementary boundaries, if we share with families and let them know these are the boundary changes that would be at the high school level if question doesn't pass, families know what's going to happen. Otherwise, we're doing all of this, spending the money again in a year to do another election, when families, similar to what we did this time, when families weren't aware what those boundaries would look like if things don't pass. So I just feel like I would have rather been proactive and had all of it done at once versus just continuing to push it down, hoping that next year it'll pass, next year it'll pass, next year it'll pass. And then before you know it, we're at 150, 160% capacity, and we have no choice but to move everybody 9 through 12 because we failed to be proactive.
And I think that administration we certainly talked about that, but I think I think it sounds like, yes, put the plan out there, we change the high school attendance boundaries. It sounds like it's doable. I think it would be extremely difficult in a year's time to make those shifts and come up with how that's going to work. Because we're thinking about moving the kids who are already established, whether it be in athletics and activities, in the grade levels. Are you moving just 9th and 10th graders? And then if you do that, are we going to get enough students from those attendance areas? We're going to have buses having to loop back in. I think it would be really difficult as a family to say, sorry, you're 11th and 12th graders now, your high school attendance boundary changed, you're going to go somewhere else, and we're going to bus them. And so administration's feeling was that it's going to take longer than just a year. We would not be prepared in less than a year to implement high school attendance boundary changes, but that certainly is a fact that if question 1, which we have already shared with our community, that first of all, it's our community who said question 1 was their highest priority. This was not our high priority. It is our high priority, but it was the community who really led us to this high priority. And I think our belief is our community told us that they see that as a significant need. And if it doesn't pass, then we know that the next go-around is that or high school attendance boundaries, and we feel like that gives our community more warning and more opportunity to say that this is a priority. So, and I'm open to hear if other board members feel differently with changing of high school attendance boundaries. That would require some additional work, but not impossible as we look at moving forward with our questions that we're going to have on November 7th. So I don't know, any other feedback from other board members?
Won't changing some of the middle school boundaries also kind of help with some of those high school boundaries, though? Because if you have less kids going to, say, some of the feeder schools that go to East Ridge and instead going to a different middle school, or is that not going to affect it at all?
I don't think it was significant.
No, not
schools.
significant enough.
So if we were to do, if we were to do a boundary change for high school, and you're saying you would implement it in the the earliest it would be implemented would be the 2025, right, 25, 26 school year, correct?
We would have to go through some type of a process. I don't think it's just as easy as changing high school attendance boundaries, that we would have to go through some type of a process with our community and or go back out for another question the next year. Mm-hmm. So then it wouldn't be happening until the start of the 25 school year.
Louise?
Yeah, I'm just went back and took a look at the numbers. The empty spaces we have available do not take care of what we're over in East Ridge. So
Right.
it's moving the problem from one school to another.
And that, Louise, that is another point that we talked about. It's moving the problem somewhere else, and we're not sure that that is going to get us at a long-term solution. And so it could be a Band-Aid. Moving kids could be a Band-Aid, but when all is said and done, is this the way the attendance boundaries are going to be? And we couldn't say for certain if those boundaries would stick after we shifted them, because depending upon where the other growth is. So that was another point that we took into consideration, that we basically are shifting kids, and how long that would last, we weren't sure.
Mm-hmm. Any other board members? Comments? Questions? Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Next, moving along to 7.0, and that's the action item. We have 7.1. It's a resolution determining the necessity of issuing general obligation bonds and calling a special election. That will be also presented this evening by our Executive Director of Finance and Operations, Dan Pine.
Thank you. Good evening again. With this, we'll go on to our action items. With the approval of the long-range facility plan, the school board has investigated the facts and does hereby find and declare that it's necessary and expedient to issue general obligation school building bonds for acquisition and betterment of school sites and facilities. And calculated the estimated cost of the package for question 1 and 2 combined is $200,497,728. To finance this package, bonds will need to be issued in the amount of $201,225,000. That's split into 2 questions. Question 2 with the elementary schools is $40,350,000. The remainder is in question 1, a little bit over $160 million. The resolution that's in front of you calls for a special election to be held on November 7, 2023. Calls for 2 separate questions. Question 1 for expansions and improvements to secondary schools. That's for $160,875,000. Question 2 is for expansions and improvements to elementary schools for $40,350,000. Resolution is required from the school board. The district was required, as I said before, to submit a school board approval review and comment to the Minnesota Department of Education. That's been done. That came back. And with that, I would ask for approval of the resolution attached.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Katie and second by Simi. Is there any discussion or comments? Okay, since this is a resolution, Dana, will you call the roll?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Dan.
You?
Dan, you up here all a long time tonight.
Yeah.
All right, next is 7.2. It's a resolution determining the necessity of revoking an existing capital project levy, authorizing replacing it with a new capital project levy, authorizations, and calling a special election, again presented by Dan Pine.
Thank you. Good evening again. As was presented 2 times to the school board, that we talked about capital projects levy. SoWashCo County Schools presently has a capital projects levy for the purpose of funding technology, which generates about $2.8 million a year. This levy was originally approved at $2 million per year in 2017. The reason the amount generates more is because the voters approved a tax rate, and that tax, the amount that comes off of that levy will increase as property values go up, and conversely would decrease if property values went down. Our budget for technology is between $5 and $6 million a year. The remainder of our budget is financed with $1.5 million from an operating levy that was approved in 2013, which in effect has run out. And the rest comes out of district operating capital or general unassigned fund balance. We feel that by increasing the $2.8 million capital projects levy to $5 million, the technology budget will have a dedicated revenue stream, and planning and projects will be much easier to take place. We talked about this at the July 13th meeting, at the August 3rd meeting. This resolution calls for a special election to be held on November 7th, 2023, for the voters to decide to revoke the current levy and replace it with a $5 million levy. And this would be for 10 years from the new levy. The current levy would require a renewal in 2027. Once again, a resolution is required by the school board. Resolution is attached.
Thank you, Dan. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution? Moved by Pat,
Second.
second by Melinda. Is there any discussions or comments? Seeing none. Since this is a resolution, Dana, will you call the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay. Now we are at 7.3, proposed policy changes, and that will be presented. Oh, by the way, thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much.
7.3, we proposed policy changes, and that will be presented by our superintendent, Julie Nielsen.
Thank you. Just a reminder that I did cover for Dan all of the last meeting, so this was kind of his payback to be up at the microphone. This evening, I am bringing forward for approval 18 policies. Those policies were reviewed by district administrators along with school board members who serve on the policy committee. Last time at our board meeting, we had some discussion about a couple of policies, so just to point out, 418, and board members were notified of this. 418, there was a change in the statute regarding marijuana legalization, and there were some initial edits that removed other substances that are used in chemistry class. So, interestingly, we had a chemistry teacher who they used some chemicals in their class as part of chemistry, and he was very concerned about our policy. I was very grateful that he read the policy, and so then we were able to make that adjustment so that they could continue on with their experiments. And then the next policy where there was some adjustment was around the student transportation safety, procedures and the rules. If you remember, please sit down. We did, after the parade, we were practicing our rules on the school bus. So those were removed and will be put into procedure and rules. And Louise, I am thinking about the final policy that we had a conversation about, a committee that was going back to the school board. Do you remember which policy that was? I don't know to change.
About site teams.
It was about site teams, and so that was in statute. So that was part of the legislative language. So with that, and our previous conversation, I am asking for approval of these 18 policies.
Thank you, Julie. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Louise and seconded by Eric. Is there any discussion or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is carried. Next is 8.0, our superintendent's report.
As I greeted the group this morning, we had our school improvement, so all of our school improvement teams, our site teams were in, and they were really quite loud and making a lot of noise. And it took about, 2 to 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes to get the whole group quiet, but they were so excited to be together. And as I greeted them, I said, the only thing that's more joyful than their voices are our students coming back. And when you hear all of that kid noise, you forget over the summer, you kind of get into this routine of quiet, and then the noise starts to come back and all the sounds, and it was beautiful. So our school improvement teams met this morning to work on, of course, what we call our SIP plans. I want to back up because Monday we hosted a tech camp, and I want to say that our number was above 350, maybe 380. I will tell you, if you went to Altman Middle School and you looked at the parking lot, you were parking on the road. And so it felt like there were 1,000 people there if you looked at the parking lot. But I believe our count was somewhere between 380 and 400 individual staff members who came in and took time in the summer to just refresh and have professional development. Many of us were also part of the parade last week. We did the Newport Parade, and for board members in our community, this week on Saturday we have our St. Paul Park Parade, and then Sunday, Woodbury Days Parade. Always a fun time. The kids love seeing us, and they love seeing the schoolie bus, and great music with the new schoolie bus. So let me just see here. Next week, we welcome back new teachers for their new teacher orientation, as well as our bus drivers. And then on August 28th, that following week, it is our staff welcome back. It's just really hard to believe that it's that time of year. And so next week, we welcome back quite a large number, and I'll report to the board. I want to say well over 150 new teachers to the district. So that's my update. Thank you.
That's at Park this year, correct?
Yes, our welcome back on August 29th is at Park High School.
At Park.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. 9.0 are our future meeting dates. We have a school board workshop meeting on September 7th, 2023 and a school board business meeting on September 21st, 2023. Both of these meetings will be held at 6 p.m. here at the District Service Center. And with that, we are now at 10.0, and we are adjourned.